Because here's the really cool thing about the Gospels, they're going to make us a little bit uncomfortable. They're going to challenge us. They're going to show us who Jesus is in a way that maybe our traditions, maybe the stuff we thought we knew, the baggage we bring to Scripture actually kind of blinded us from. So before we launch this journey through the Gospels, I wanted to take a minute to fill you in on what you can expect from the podcast. So every day is going to follow the same order, and it's going to take anywhere from 5 to 12 minutes. Most episodes, I think, are going to land around the 7-minute mark. Each day, we're going to begin by briefly introducing the passage that we're going to be exploring. Then we're going to open in prayer. After all, scripture without the spirit who authored it is just books. But in the hands of the living Spirit of God, the author of Scripture, the one who brings it to life in us and uses it as a powerful tool to shape us like Jesus, well, then it is a powerful thing that draws us nearer to the God who made us and loves us. So we'll open by praying, including the prayer that Jesus taught us. If you read the Gospels, which we're going to do together, you'll see that the prayer Jesus gives us is a powerful prayer to pray, meant to shape the church. So we'll open with a time of prayer, and then I'll invite you to just really, you're invited to use this time to prepare your heart. And then we're just going to jump into scripture. So we're going to read a passage from the Gospels out of one translation that's more word for word, kind of closer to the Greek. After this first reading, we're going to examine just a little bit of the context behind this passage we're exploring. What's happening? What does it mean in the world of the first century? For those of you who have studied this kind of stuff, you're not going to learn anything new here. Maybe it'll serve as a refresher. Maybe it'll just be something you gotta kind of like bear with for a moment. But for those of you who've never really studied this stuff, it's going to open up the background of the New Testament, and particularly just open up the passage that we're looking at and help your understanding of Scripture to grow deeper. That's why I love to learn the background, the context. It's so important not just to understand what we're reading, but that it actually helps us to understand Scripture better and hear the Spirit speak to us through it. So after this, we're going to read through a second time, this time with a translation that's a little bit more kind of thought for thought. It's still an accurate picture of what the Greek is saying, but in a way that's designed to welcome us in a little bit more. As we read this time, we're going to take time to listen for what the Spirit is speaking to you today, right now, through these words of Scripture. Then we'll actually have a moment of instrumental after this second reading, just giving you some time to meditate on the words and listen for the Spirit. And if you need more time, then you're encouraged to go ahead and just hit the pause button until you're ready to continue. After this, I'm going to kind of take off the Bible nerd hat and put on the pastor hat and just speak briefly to what the Spirit has highlighted for the church in this passage as I was meditating on it in preparation for the podcast, which is why I will never film more than a week's worth at a time, because I want to make sure that I'm faithfully listening to the voice of the Spirit in the context of Scripture for what He is saying to His people here and now. Um, so then, after this, we're going to pray again, inviting the Spirit to really realize these truths in our life, to make them not just head knowledge, but something that's happening in our heart as we enter into our day. Having encountered Jesus and ready to go and follow Him as we go. And then we're going to end with one final reading from the passage, this time in a paraphrase designed to really immerse us in the story, maybe shake us up a little bit. Because here's the really cool thing about the Gospels, they're going to make us a little bit uncomfortable. They're going to challenge us. They're going to show us who Jesus is in a way that maybe our traditions, maybe the stuff we thought we knew, the baggage we bring to Scripture actually kind of blinded us from, because Jesus is going to make himself known. That's why we're focusing in the Gospels and not on the Bible as a whole or the New Testament as a whole. We're going to, of course, reference some of the stuff the apostles write in their letters. Of course, we're going to pull out some of the Old Testament prophecy that's mentioned as it comes up. But our focus is to let the Gospels tell us the gospel in their own words, and to be challenged, comforted, encouraged, and built up as we go. So after this final reading, we're going to have just a little bit more instrumental, a time for silence and reflection and meditation. And of course, that's where it's going to end. So you're welcome to sit in that moment of reflection and silence for as long as you would like. As you can see, this is really just meant to be a tool. It's a tool to give you something to help work into your time with Jesus in Scripture. So if all you have is 10 minutes, just listen as you reflect along the way. If you're on a long walk, or maybe you have a long commute, or you've just got a really deep cup of coffee, feel free to pause for far longer in between each of these movements through Scripture, because my words are actually the least important part of this podcast. And the second most important part are the words of Scripture. But the most important is actually what the Spirit is speaking to your spirit as you encounter Jesus. So pause as often as you need to. Let this be a way for you to encounter Jesus, nothing more and nothing less. So whether you take your journey with Jesus on your commute or over your morning coffee, in the stillness of night, let this simply be an easy launching point for you to encounter Jesus in the pages of the Gospels.